here we are.
Hey, it worked.
Awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Great. So good to see you, Nelly. Thanks for coordinating this.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to the conversation and answering some questions that a lot of founders generally have. So
Yes.
let's dive in.
Yeah. So just to give my network a little bit of background, Nelly and I met late last year through Allison Byers of Scroobius. And I was so excited, Nelly, to learn what you've created and to share your resources with my network of founders. And as you know, my jam's working alongside startup founders and seasoned professionals who are starting their own businesses. And it's in health tech, aging tech, edu tech, and services. And then also non-tech business owners who are trying to kind of get up to speed and play catch up with the digital economy. So this is so pertinent. So I thought this would be the perfect venue to have an inspired conversation. And I love that you've pushed me out of my comfort zone to try a new streaming platform.
Yeah, we're on Restream today. So
yeah, just as I got used to live stream, now I'm trying another. So this is great. So first, I'd love to get a little bit of background of you and how you started doing this. And then we'll dig into the questions. And I've gathered a bunch of questions from my clients and my founder network for you.
Yeah. All right. So how did I get started? I am a CTO and a startup tech advisor. So prior to TechSpeak, I used to work as a consultant and a fractional CTO with a lot of different companies. I also was the CTO of a company called Web Girls, which started in 1995.
Yes.
It's been the grandmother of all internet. And it's been such an amazing ride. I learned everything I know from there and running the team there. And at some point, I decided that I really loved teaching. And I started speaking at different conferences and events on behalf of Web Girls. And literally every event that I went to, I had a huddle of entrepreneurs sharing their horror story. And I'm not kidding. I don't know if it's because I'm a friendly female CTO, which is a little bit unusual, but I just heard my fair share of horror stories. And after, I just started thinking, how is this even possible? And blaming developers for the longest time. I started realizing that sometimes it's the developer's fault, but the onus is on the entrepreneur to catch the red flags and actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Because it's unrealistic that no one's going to make a mistake. You can make the best hire and they're going to be amazing in the beginning. But if they're starting to slip, it's your job to catch that sooner rather than later. And so that's where once I made that realization that it's not all the horrible developers. In fact, most of the time, it's not the developer at all. It's because he or she was mismanaged or the team was mismanaged and you didn't communicate the requirements clearly, or you just couldn't do it. You didn't know what to say. You didn't have a process and all of that. And so once I made that realization, I started looking for resources because I never even thought, oh, let me teach this, right? I couldn't find anything online. And so I said, well, I guess I have to create it. And the catalyst was a friend of mine who lost $60,000 working with a potential tech co-founder who she absolutely trusted. But this person hired a team in another country, didn't tell her, was a horrible project manager, blew through $60,000 of her hard-earned money. And that was it. And so she couldn't recoup it. She had to go back to work. She couldn't be an entrepreneur. And that was really the last straw. I was just like, okay, let me create a resource and actually teach founders, whether they're technical or not. It's actually funny because I work a lot with non-technical founders, but the processes that I teach are based on lean and agile methodologies. And I find that a lot of technical entrepreneurs don't know these processes. And in general, developers are not taught management. And that's where I work with all kinds of different entrepreneurs from all different stages, teaching them this process that can help them manage tech teams and projects a lot more.
That's so awesome. I mean, you just brought to mind a situation with my startup. This was years ago, but yeah, we had a wonderful tech team. And right before we were about to get a round of funding, they broke up. the team broke up and we had nobody and we had to scramble to find someone else. It was a nightmare. I remember sitting in my car like in tears. Anyway, wow. So that is a great story, and I love that you just kind of sat there and said, I got to do this thing.
Yeah.
So here you are.
Here I am.
So let me ask you a first question there. How is it possible? How does a non-tech founder just get up to speed on tech requirements and get their arms around it without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think there are three pillars that I think that go into really understanding how to manage a process. Number one, you have to know the skill sets of a product manager and a project manager. You have to know it. If that's going to be you, the job of an entrepreneur is to manage the process. If you don't have, this is what I find in early stage entrepreneurs, they don't have the funding to hire a full-time product manager and a full-time project manager. So that role is not being played by anyone. They're just relying on, especially if they're outsourcing, on the dev shop to provide those resources. But that's a recipe for disaster. So the number one thing you should be doing is really understanding who's going to be playing that role. And if it's not like you can't afford somebody, you can learn these skills. And so at TechSpeak, the two things that I teach that are really important is lean product management and agile project management. And the third piece to the puzzle is, if you're not technical, is to really learn the tech jargon. You need to understand the infrastructure, how everything is structured, how everything works together on the back end. Get familiar on the high level. You don't need to be a developer, but you need to understand what I call the tech speak, right? Like you have to be comfortable speaking the language. And if somebody tells you, we need to do X and X and X, you understand that, right? And you can continue to have that conversation. And also the confidence that you get from being technically literate, being able to ask the right questions at the right time, all of these things are what will give you the specific guideline of, hey, this doesn't seem to be working properly, right? These are the red flags. We talked about catching mistakes earlier. That's what will give you the exact information that you need to know, hey, I don't know all the answers, but I know that this is not right and I need to address it right now and figure out why. So those are the three pillars that I want non-technical entrepreneurs to realize that you need to have in order to manage a team properly.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's no way around it. If you are going to manage a tech team, you've got to learn the lingo. All right. And you've got to, as we named this, demystify it, right? So you got to demystify and learn the language.
Yeah.
Not the programming language, but how to talk to the team.
Yeah.
So you need to learn, like, what would be the top three things that, you need to learn, like what kind of platform, right?
You need to learn all the different programming languages, right? And how they work together. You need to understand the backend server infrastructure, like on a high level. Like, how does that all work together? If you type something in a browser, what happens on the back end? And like, just have a visual understanding of what all of that is like and inner workings. You need to also understand how your application is structured and all the different ways that apps can be built. Right? There's no code,
how do you
low code, custom coding, and then like everything in between. And you need to understand the relationship between all of those different things and how you can use and leverage all of those technologies at your fingertips to solve the problems that you have.
Awesome. So that's a great segue into another question that one of my founders asks. And I've heard lots of entrepreneurs talk about building no-code apps and platforms. What does that mean? And what's your take on that? Is that really saving you time and money, or does that mean you just have to start all over again when you bring in your own dev team?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And for a lot of the people who know me, and like, I'm a huge proponent of building products the lean way and optimizing your process for learning, especially in the early days. Everything you're doing is 100% guesswork. You think you know your customers, you think you know what they need, but you have no clue. Like, everything is 100% guess. And to me, the number one focus in early stage startups is to remove the guesswork as much as you can, as quickly as you can, so that you can iterate quickly to product market fit.
Yes.
And if you
Yeah.
are spending 90% of your time building that perfect technology and not launching and not learning, you're wasting a lot of time. And so
Okay.
for some startups, depending on what you're building, no code may not be the right option. But if you are able to, and right, like at TechSpeak, I teach that ultimately it's always a combination of some no code, some low code, and some custom coding. And
Okay.
it's okay to mix and match. I had a founder in my program. I think she went for a year and a half on no code tools that she just put together, and she
Yep.
proved the concept of her startup. And then when she joined TechSpeak, her whole goal was to learn how to manage the custom coding part of the business and working with developers.
Okay.
And so she didn't completely scrap all of her no code solutions. She just started optimizing the things that no longer could scale. And so
Yeah.
when you're making decisions on should I use no code or low code or something else, it really depends. Like to me, it's not a waste of time, because if it gives you 6 months to a year of learning,
Hmm.
guess what? If you have to start over, you're not starting at the same exact point that you did 6 months or a year ago. You have 6 months to a year worth of learning. And so your new version two is going to be 100% better in
Okay.
terms of where you are and how it needs to be structured than you were a year ago.
And you probably wouldn't have spent $500,000 in
Exactly.
development costs. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. That's super helpful. All right. So here's another question. I'm going to read this one. Many founders I speak to are worried about hiring or finding a CTO to add to their team, because if they're going to go out and do a first raise, they need to show that they have a team in place. Yet until they raise the money, they can't afford a CTO. And now with with the world the way it is now, they are CTOs want to be compensated more than CEOs, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of tricky. So, what how should a founder think about approaching this if they don't have a CTO already and they don't even know what to ask for?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's such a great question. I would highly encourage you guys to go to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/digitalwoman, and watch the video called The 6 Qualities That a CTO Should Have.
Okay.
And what I say there is that when a lot of early stage entrepreneurs think that you need a CTO and you understand the qualities of a real CTO, right? When the company is an actual company,
Hmm.
the CTO doesn't write code. The CTO is really a high level strategic thinker. They're the person that translate business and technology, and they are both a tech person and a business person. None of those things are what you need when you have a very small team and the whole goal is to build a product that makes sense, right? That somebody wants. And so in the early days, when you say I need a CTO, what you're really saying is I need a developer who can work for equity, who can build my product, right? And when you think of it in that way, it's a lot easier to hire a senior developer rather than a CTO. So that's
Okay.
the first thing. You need to be
That's
thinking and
so helpful.
understanding who do you need to hire really?
Mhm.
And so, having said that, it doesn't mean that you don't look for a CTO, because to find this golden nugget in the world is so hard. It's going to take a lot of time. And what I teach entrepreneurs is make build relationships, build your network of technical contacts parallel to you building the product, because it may take you 2 to 3 years sometimes to find that perfect person who
Wow.
can really be the true CTO. And in the
Wow.
early days, you don't, the reason why my job exists, so I'm a fractional CTO. And
Okay.
I work
Yep.
with a lot of founders who don't need a full time CTO. Frankly, if you have a senior developer and some junior developers and or some team,
Hmm.
you only need to bring in a high level strategic advisor a few times in your startup, right? Like whenever you need it. And so that's not a full-time hire. And so if you think of it that way, working with fractional people to get
Yep.
the strategic advice that you still need and not have to pay a full-time CTO level person, you're also saving a lot of money.
Right.
And so
I
that's
have a
how I would,
question.
yeah,
I want
go for it.
one clarifying question. Do a lot of senior development people call themselves CTOs?
That whole title thing is
Yeah.
it's so out of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's because the venture community started saying, you need a CTO, you need a
Yeah.
CTO, right? And so obviously everybody started using that terminology. But if you think about it, and think about this, if you give somebody who is just a developer the title of a CTO, the highest technical title you can give somebody, now 2 years down the road, they can't jump into that real management role because they either hate it or they can't do it
Yeah.
or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you gonna you love this person, they're amazing, but are you gonna demote them? Because
Yeah.
that's what you'll have to do. And so to give somebody the highest title before
Yeah.
knowing that number one, they're a good fit for it, that they can do the job, at some point you're going to have very difficult conversations. And so
Yes. Yeah.
I want entrepreneurs to make decisions on purpose. Like most of the time, they're just being baffled by the gurus in the industry who are
Yeah.
saying this thing or this thing. And so just be mindful of what advice you're
Yeah.
listening to and make decisions on purpose.
Excellent. Excellent. So we only have a couple more minutes. So I wanted to ask one more question. And this came up that in the comment was it's so hard managing external development resources, especially if they're offshore. What are some tips and guidance on managing external development teams? How do you structure? This is long, like we're not going to get into all of this, but even for fairly technical folks, sometimes you can just get into those red flags, I think, that you were talking about.
Yeah. I think to me, the number one reason why a lot of projects fail is because they don't have a really good process. They just kind of fly by the seat of their pants, hoping that it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to just work out on its own. And so I talk about product management and project management.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two things that absolutely need to exist. And I also teach at one. And by the way, if a lot of you want to learn the process, there are free webinars that I offer on this topic.
Awesome.
And in those webinars, I teach this concept called developer as a service arrangement. And what this means is that someone on your team, whether that's you and or your own product manager, project manager that you hire, right, depending on the scale of and the size of your company, somebody has to directly manage the team and work with them and implement your own process. Even though the development shop may have their own product
Yeah.
managers, project managers, it doesn't matter. What I want you to do is to work directly with developers, because implementing this process of iterating quickly and fast and being able to change directions, which is what a lot of early stage startups need,
Right.
having that middleman or middle person is never fast enough, and you just are too disconnected to be able to
Yeah.
find the problems fast enough. And so that's what I would encourage a lot of founders to think and understand.
We have a bunch of questions here, which we won't be able to get to everything, but if you could just, in a nutshell, recommend some product management tools. And then I also have another question about interactive prototype tools.
Okay.
Are there any, I'm assuming we mean off the shelf, like are there any, what would you recommend for most people who are managing the process of product management and project management?
So literally every tool on the market that's out there right now that works for agile teams, including something as simple as Trello,
Yeah.
will work
Okay.
for you. The problem is never ever the tools. You can enhance your team by giving them really good tools, but if you have a really bad process, tools, you can have the best tools on the planet. You're still going to be behind. You're still going to have
Yeah.
no idea how to manage that team properly. So it's never about the tools. And when people ask me tools, I'm like, I know that they're asking it from the wrong place. And literally, I know people who used to use spreadsheets to manage their teams that did it really well because they had a really great process.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
that, any tool on the market now is great. It wouldn't exist if it didn't work well. Okay, so
So it's
Monday.com, Trello, um, any other, like literally any other tool that supports agile teams is going to work.
okay. Cool. Oh, well, it's 20 minutes. We said we cap it off at 20. This was so fun. Thank you. Thank you, Nelly. And I hope we have another conversation because I know there's so many questions. And I just invite everybody to come to my next founders table, which is coming on February 17th. Hopefully Nelly will be there. And it's an opportunity for founders to ask their most pressing questions and get feedback from peers. Nelly, thank you so much. And where can people find you here?
Yeah, just go to techspeak.co. As I mentioned, I have a lot of free webinars that you can register for. They're on demand, so you can use your, whenever you have flexibility and time to actually watch them. I see Noel asked the question about prototyping tools. I talk about tools there as well, so check them out. And I talk about how to do it properly. So
Wonderful.
that's
Awesome.
the best place to go.
And if you're watching the replay, please comment and say hello so we can reach out to you. And either Nelly or I are happy to answer your questions. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
You are welcome.
I'll
We'll
see
talk
you
to you
soon. This was
soon.
awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.